As Indigenous and non-Indigenous people gathering together, let us have a sense of the importance upon the country upon which this celebration is being held, where learning and ceremony have taken place over many thousands of years. Let us sense the land beneath our feet and acknowledge to whom it belongs, the Gimmaway, Wallabara, and Yidinji people. Let us pay our respect to their elders and all elders, past, present, and future, for we too are one in land, one in spirit, one in faith, united in God's love. Together we walk on a journey of forgiveness and reconciliation. Please join me in the sign of the cross. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, you sent your Son Jesus to bring about change to the culture he was living in. He challenged the people to treat every person with dignity and respect. As we listen to our guest speaker tonight, open our minds and hearts to hearing how we can be agents of change in the world we live in. Inspire us to help recreate a just world where healthy relationships are allowed to thrive and are celebrated. In hope we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Thank you, Gus, and thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody. So Gus, as most of you are probably aware, is our college captain, and he's one of our boarders, and Michael is also one of our boarders who comes from Mobiarg Island, and he was on the Didge tonight. So it's always good to have boarders in a school because they do all those odd jobs after hours that we can't get the day kids to do. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to St Augustine's. And I think most of you know me, but a couple of you may not. So my name's Glenn Severson. I'm the principal of St Augustine's. And last year we had Melinda Tankard-Reist and Dan Principe present to our students. And they also presented at last year's Parent Forum. And the information that they presented is so important that we asked them back this year. And today we had Daniel working with the Year 9 boys and Melinda working with the Year 9 girls. And then they brought them together for an afternoon session. So from what I've gathered from the boys, I haven't spoken to the girls yet, although I do have a daughter in Year 9, so I'll find out how she went tonight. But the boys found the morning session really good and they got a lot from it. Then when they came to the girls, they found it very intimidating. So it's just interesting, but it's good to put them in those situations. So we had arranged for this day to happen before a lot of awful statistics came out this year. And this year alone, in 2024, we've had 26 females killed by males at this point, and that is double the number of last year. And I think from all the media reports that we know about, we need to have a cultural shift in men's behaviour and men's attitude in Australia. And we've known that for a long time. Actually, the first time that I heard Melinda speak was 19 years ago, and it was at Canberra Girls Grammar, and I was at a co-ed school then, and I took a group of girls to listen to her speak. And back then, before digital devices and before mobile phones, she was talking about pornography, sexualisation, exploitation of women 20 years ago. So she's been championing the cause for a long time. Today, Dan presented to our boys and he challenged our boys to be decent, kind, respectful young men who make healthy decisions. So I did, as I speak to a lot of boys as they went out this afternoon, as I said, and they did get a lot out of it, so thank you, Dan. So I welcome Melinda and Dan. I'll hand over to them and I hope you get a lot out of tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to just roam for a moment just to say hi there. I'm Dan, and it's an absolute privilege to be here. Thank you so much to St Augustine for bringing me back. Thank you so much for the privilege and trust to combine the schools as well. Like, it's no small thing to bring young people together to talk about some pretty significant topics, things that we all deeply care about. So I just want to thank you so much for the privilege. I love this. I have such a wonderful opportunity to present this to you most weeks where I get to sit there and invest in young people. And I just want to thank you all as parents. And I'll just say this up front in case I forget to do it later. Like, I recognise I'm a strange person coming into your school and the community, chatting to your young people, and I don't take that for what you answer. And I do hope that you, from your young boys that you had in the Year 9 today, sharing with you about what happened and what kind of conversations we're going to share today. But I don't take it lightly. I just think that so I want to just quickly give an acknowledgement and an overview of pretty much what I endeavour to do every day, every week in schools, which is to champion boys and to challenge the culture, to recognise that our boys need to know that we care for them, that we see the good in them, that we're committed to seeing them thrive in a culture that I don't think is setting it up for boys and girls, but for boys especially at the moment, to thrive in themselves and in their relationships. And so I make this distinction that I want to champion them, but I want to challenge the culture, and I see how the culture is hurting them, harming them, limiting them in terms of how they see themselves, how they see their relationships. And I recognize that we're growing up in very different times. The young people, your young people, are growing up in a world of smartphones, social media, and sexualized content at a click away. That was certainly not my high schooling experience. Puberty, adolescence is tricky for every person, but for me, I got my first phone in year 10. It was a Nokia 3310, which limits the amount of carnage you can inflict upon yourself and anyone else. I could play Snake on the back of a school bus, and that's it. Whereas sadly, as I'm sure you parents are aware of, that's just not the world young people are growing up in. And I want to be really clear, it's not their fault. They didn't create these platforms. They didn't create these billion and trillion dollar industries that prey on their attention, that prey on their insecurities to keep them clicking, scrolling, consuming. And so, of course, all of us are here tonight because we're all committed to seeing young people thrive and flourish in this culture. So today what I want to do is especially have a focus on young boys, and Melinda will come and dissect some of the things for young women. Now, as your young people today saw, a lot of the challenge that they're all facing are shared, and we use that as a platform to humanize and empathize with one another, that there is so many shared challenges that a young man and a young woman is navigating. But I do want to recognize that things have changed, and they've changed really, really quickly. I grew up in Perth in Western Australia. I was raised by a single mum, and I was a soft, sensitive kid. I'm sure you can all imagine the kind of things said about you when you're a soft, sensitive kid growing up in Australia, especially when you're a male. And that was my experience. I got snuck into an all-boys school, and I was bullied a lot. At least for me, with my Nokia 3310, once I hopped on the school bus home, that was at least over. There was peace, there was respite. But that was my experience, and I learned pretty quickly I could never be man enough. I could never be tough enough. It didn't matter if I represented the school in football and athletics, which I did. I learned I could never be man enough. And I saw the way that boys were socialized. I was heartbroken by the way that I saw boys treat one another, but I was such a passive, soft, sensitive kid. I didn't know how to say or do anything to challenge some of the things in our culture that I saw harming us back then. These are some of the challenges that your young people describe to me on an ongoing basis. These are not a TikTok challenge like go and do this. This is like a clear and present reality for young people as they navigate the world around them. Please feel free to put your hand up and ask me any questions. We've been doing this all day. If there's any words or statements up there that you'd like me to illuminate. But this is, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great. Doxing, any others whilst we're taking, yep. Doxing, yep. Looks maxing? Yeah, great, thank you. They're probably the most two common that I get asked about. So when the boys see looks maxing, they all start giggling. They know. They all start giggling. This is the biggest phenomenon on TikTok for them over the last 6 to 12 months. It's influencers preying on their insecurities, telling them if they buy this product or do these exercises, they can change their jaw shape, their hairline, their bone structure. We're not just talking about getting healthier or fitter, whatever that means to you. These influencers are trying to prey on boys' insecurities, and it comes with all sorts of ideas that they can rub products on their faces and do certain jaw activities to get a more pronounced jaw. These are the things that are bombarding them. Doxing is when someone leaks your private information online to try and intimidate you, blackmail you, harass you by kind of saying, hey, I know where you live, I know your phone number, like people can come and get you. So sadly, that is the world that our young people are all navigating. It's not their fault. These things have obviously captivated them as an audience, and of course affect how they relate to themselves, how they relate to one another. And of course things like looks maxing, we've known that these things affect young women in terms of the pressures on their body image, but these are some of the things happening to young boys as well. Now I do this work, as your young boys heard from me today many times, because I hold them in really high regard. Now I can say that, but the reality is every day I rock up to a different school believing what I know to be true, which is I'm going to see their incredible insights, their empathy. The hardest part, I think, is the courage to live out what they know to be true all the time. Like for that to actually be who they are, irrespective of whether their mate's watching. And I want to talk about how boys are portrayed and the ideas. Like, boys are very sensitive at the moment to what's happening in the media about how we talk about boys and what's happening to them. I'm not saying that as a judgment, I'm just saying that as an objective observation and what they feed back to me, including your young men today. Because there's so much said about them, but not necessarily with them, not alongside them, not listening to them about what they're navigating. And I worry that if we don't actually engage them, they're going to go and find kind of sympathy from toxic or really ugly voices online that maybe validate what they're feeling. But I want to talk about how they're portrayed, because this slide today provoked a lot of conversations between me and your young men about how they feel that they're represented, what's said about boys, are there enough positive role models, where do they look to for good examples of masculinity and manhood, which we want to champion amongst them. And of course, that's what your school Saints is here doing, championing for your young men. But I looked at some of the global research over the summer, and it showed from an Australian professor who'd analysed media portrayals that 75% of these portrayals had men in these 4 categories. I would also argue that you could probably say maybe a fool or a bumbling buffoon as to another kind of trope that men are portrayed in mainstream culture. And I know for me as a young boy growing up in a single parent household with my mum, I didn't necessarily have healthy male role models around me. And then if I switched on the television, these are the types of gentlemen that I saw on display. I wasn't seeing gentlemen. I wasn't seeing good dads, good husbands, diligent humans, respectful humans, people that were worth aspiring to, I think, in terms of their values, in terms of how they treated others. It was these kinds of tropes and very much limiting how we should see ourselves as men. Now, these 2 gentlemen here have been viewed hundreds of billions of times across all sorts of memes. That's an understatement. All sorts of memes and reels. You have on the left there Giga Chad, and on the right Mike Ahern. These 2 men feature in all sorts of funny videos and memes on social media platforms. And we have to wonder how this is shaping boys' understandings. And I'm not purely saying it's just these 2 memes, but these ideas that this is how men and boys should look. I had a mother at my gym in Sydney say that her 7-year-old boy, who's not on social media, doesn't have a smartphone, was running around the house flexing, posing, sticking his jaw out and playing a certain music. And I said, yeah, he's trying to be like Giga Chad, the man on the left there. He's very conscious of how he should look. Last week we were in Streaky Bay and South Australia, and I was blown away by how many mums told me that their 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old sons are asking if they can get weights and when they can go to the gym because they're not feeling like they're big enough. Now, that's always happened. I remember being in high school and at a footy culture, ladsy culture, and me and the guys would go to the gym. We didn't know what we were doing, but we'd go to the gym in high school in year 10, 11, and 12. But, we didn't really, it wasn't even on my radar, and to have boys getting younger and younger worried about their body image and other natural attributes. Do you guys know who this character is and what he represents? Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Anyone read the book? Anyone watched the film? Yeah, I watched the film sped up on a flight back from Broome last year because we'd spent the day in Broome and I'd worked with 4 primary schools, year 5 and 6 boys, and they kept talking about Sigma. Patrick Bateman represents this Sigma meme, this motive, this idea that boys and men should be these unfeeling, reclusive, lone wolf, calloused individuals who are disconnected from themselves, from relationships, who are hyper-conscious of their looks. And we spoke a lot about this today because when his face comes up in my talks, the boys all laugh, and I'm not singling out any school, but today the boys know and talk about Sigma non-stop. And it's not just Saints, we're talking about every school I go to across the country. There is this idea of how they should be as men and this idea that they should be unfeeling. Is it any wonder that we're kind of in a loneliness epidemic in the Western world for males? And I wonder, what came first, this idea to be a lone wolf recluse, or is meme reflecting reality? Is reality reflecting the memes? I don't even know. But all I know is that these limited ideas of masculinity are so harmful for our young men who have been told that this is cool. Body Shop, of course, here on display saying, "Wake up with a big one." I don't think it'll surprise any person in this room to know that our young men are more conscious of their penis size, their height, their musculature than any other generation before, because they're bombarded with other people's anatomy. Forgive me for being indecent, parents. It was on an earlier slide. Like, this is the generation of the dick pic. I wasn't talking about these things 6, 7, 8 years ago, but this is the world they're living in. I'm not judging them for that. I mean, who knows what our generation would have done or if we had access to these sorts of things. It's just they can do these things, so they do these things. But they're more conscious of their anatomy, how they look, and it's not just ideas about how their physical attributes should measure up. They're worried, are they man enough? And I don't think that this is a terrible question to ask, and I have this conversation with adult men and young men all the time about our ideas of what it is to be a man and a good man. And today with your young men, I unpacked the real man versus the good man. And if someone told you to, be a real man, what would that conjure up? What would that image be versus if you heard a man being described by his wife, his son, his daughter as a good man? What kind of idea would that provoke? And boys, sadly, in this country are trying to prove this question through destructive means. It's not really a terrible question, but it's like, how are you going to know if you're a man or you're man enough or you're a good man? Sadly, here in Australia, this man box research conducted by Jesuit Social Services found that these are the types of ideas that boys and men feel that they have to conform to, that this is how you prove that you're a man. You're tough, you don't ever cry, you dominate and control others, you drink alcohol, you do risky, stupid things. And as I said to your young men today, I happen to think there's a bit more to being a man than do you drink beers and drive a ute and do stupid things. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about what those attributes are, what those characteristics are, and if we can celebrate and champion them. And of course, these ideas are reinforced by all sorts of statements like this and far worse, which your boys all put their hands up today to all 8 of these statements that they hear these things said, mostly in jest, but of course, reinforcing these ideas about how they ought to be as a man. Now, 2 out of 3 boys feel the pressure in this country to conform to those ideas of the man box. That doesn't mean they believe them. It doesn't mean they like those ideas. It just means that they feel these pressures to have sex, get into fights, drink alcohol, and do risky, stupid things. They know that's not serving them, but there is a lot of pressure for them to prove themselves through these means. And the sad reality is the men and boys stuck more in the man box. I'm sure here as adults we could recognize these men in our communities. They're not doing too well. They are more likely to be suicidal, to self-harm, to not enjoy everyday life. What a tragedy. This isn't to judge these men. They clearly need help. They need support. They need care, connection, and community, especially if we want to address some of the significant challenges that Glenn mentioned in our culture. It's not to say that if you aren't trapped in this man box that you'd never do these things, but just the likelihood. And these men are sadly a very clear and present danger to other men and to women. They're so much more likely to sexually harass, sexually assault, to be violent towards a woman or a man. And we might hear these arguments, and sometimes they still persist, about boys will be boys. I think we've come a long way from this, but some of these ideas still persist. And I love this quote to highlight the reality, which is how I guess I see this as well, that I see this as so anti-male. I don't subscribe to this. You could sum this up as the bigotry of low expectations, to say, well, I don't expect boys to show leadership, to show maturity, to set an example, to take responsibility. I just kind of expect them to be immature. And I don't subscribe to that. I'm not suggesting they need to be perfect or to never make a mistake. I just think that there's so much more than the cultural limitations placed on them. And we're seeing this across the Western world, that boys aren't faring as well as girls in educational outcomes and in other areas. There's obviously particular challenges for girls that Melinda will highlight, but I want to acknowledge this, and I kind of don't think this kind of anti-male boys will be boys sentiment helps us. This is my vision for boys, and not only do I believe it's who they can be, I think it's who many of them are, and I got to see that today. Your Year 9 boys impressed me so much. It was a deeply moving and profound session, especially our first workshop together. Their insights, their empathy, the courage of a group of boys to speak up about things that matter to them, I just find so profoundly impactful. Now, of course, it's not just social media, it's not just stereotypes that continue to affect young people and young boys especially. We have to talk about pornography. I know we don't want to. The reality is this is such a feature for young people and young boys especially, that we just have to address these topics. And again, it's not their fault. And for context, you know, how many billions is the porn industry? Well, 97 billion. And I don't know about you, parent, but I think this is a pretty unfair fight if we want to teach consent and respectful relationships and healthy sexuality to have to compete with a $97 billion a year industry. Now, I think I'm pretty good at my job, but I can't compete with this when, according to the latest research, 20% of boys watch porn every day, and it's about 54% at least once a week. For contrast, it's about 1 to 3% of girls every single day. And this is not just stimulation. It's not just a supernormal stimulus, which is what the psychologists call this. It's actually acting as a default sex educator. But my question is, like, what is it educating? What is it teaching us? And I can only talk from my own experience in this regard. Like, I was exposed to pornography when I was 11 years of age. I shared that with your young men today to normalize this in the sense that they're not in trouble, they're not bad, they're not wrong. I was shown by an older family friend. I've only learnt later in life that it's a crime, it's considered grooming, especially when that person is over 18 and you're under 16. It's always sexual harassment. But that was my experience. This was my first introduction to bodies, to sex, to other people's genitals, to consent. Whether I knew it or not, it was teaching me something about some really significant topics. And I've now spent my adult life since my early 20s trying to unlearn some of those things and imagine and embrace a healthier vision of sexuality, one that I'm still on the journey of. And I say that just to be honest. The part I didn't share with your young men today is that I was exposed on a floppy disk because they'd have no idea what that is. But that was the experience I had. They're in a different world. It wasn't a floppy disk we have to be worried about. It's the fact that 30% of the internet is pornography. That's pretty significant, right? That's pretty significant. I just read from the Internet Watch Foundation just last week. They released their research on 2023. And this is a very troubling statistic. There was 250,000 websites dedicated to child abuse material. Some people call it child pornography, but of course it's not pornography, it's child abuse material. 250,000 websites. If you were to type porn into Google, which I don't recommend, you're going to get over 6 billion search results. And can I just make it categorically clear, this isn't young people's fault. They didn't choose this, but they have to navigate this. And if your young person comes and speaks to you tonight, tomorrow, next week, or in the months ahead, that this is something they've been exposed to, I've reassured them that you're not going to get them in trouble, you're not going to shame them, that this is something that is preying on them. I have year 5 and 6 boys telling me they have inappropriate pop-ups, sex bots in their online spaces. Again, they're not at fault. I'm just telling you this because I imagine, you know, you're aware of this, and this is the world that they're growing up in and that they haven't created. The average age of exposure, this is old statistics, it's 2018. Those numbers are a little bit less now. Now, the reality is we have to talk about dopamine to make sense of pornography. The reality is pornography spikes dopamine about 2 to 2.5 times the normal limits. For comparison, cocaine and ecstasy is about 3 to 3.5 times. That's why this is called a supernormal stimulus. It's why some people call this the new drug. But unlike those other drugs, which have some serious education and barriers that would stop any person, especially a young person, accessing them, we're talking about a potential drug that is freely accessible, available 24/7, and can be consumed anonymously. And a lot of boys, I think a lot of people think they consume it because they're horny. My experience, having spoken to tens of thousands of boys, it's usually because they're low mood. It's because they're bored, sad, lonely, depressed, feeling rejected, and this is a quick and easy way to get a happy hit. I mean, nobody likes feeling low mood, and let's be honest, as humans, we've all coped and soothed in lots of different ways, from shopping to food to sleep to alcohol to whatever. We've all coped in different ways. This is just a supernormal stimulus that can really give you that happy hit. And the questions I put to your boys today were vast and numerous because I don't want them to just hear what I think. I mean, they're going to hear that, but I want to engage them to think about what they think, what their attitudes and beliefs are. And Melinda's going to take you on a bit of a crash course of that in just a moment. But it's really important for them to think, like, is any of this, are these systems, are these industries equipping them to have a healthy relationship with themselves and with one another, and to understand healthy, respectful, romantic relationships? And again, I asked this rhetorical question, and it's obviously up for them to answer them. I spoke to you young men about being upstanders today. We could talk about this a lot. The biggest thing I want to highlight is that they need the courage to care. I think a lot of people think that courage is just going to be birthed out of nowhere, but my biggest worry is everything I've shown you, especially this Sigma Patrick Bateman trope, is so about getting boys to become callous, to be indifferent, to be disconnected from themselves and others. I so worry that some of the most dominant messages that they get are about them being uncaring, about them being disconnected from other people, not having empathy. And we know that both the platforms themselves, the tech itself, and the messages that they're getting in a dominant fashion really reinforce not having empathy. I want to encourage them to be able to speak up, stand up for themselves. I'm just going to share a few tips here that I'm happy to chat more about afterwards. There's no end to, no doubt, your own efforts to raise healthy, resilient, decent young people. I think we have to champion boys. This is a little bit boy-centric. Melinda's going to speak more broadly at the end and give way more information and insights, but we have to let them know that we actually care about them, we're committed to them. I think boys at the moment do feel extraordinarily sensitive around this. I think we have to think about our culture, and we spoke about this today at the staff meeting. Like, what do we celebrate? What stories do we tell? Who are heroes? What do we value? Are we reinforcing that? Because it's harder to critique toxic influences like Tate if we don't already have a pre-existing framework of what we believe are good values, good heroes, good frameworks in terms of what we mean when we say a good man. I tell your young people to choose their heroes wisely, to choose their friends wisely, to notice good things in good humans around us and to celebrate that. I get asked a lot when I'm interviewed in media or parents ask me about good role models. The reality is I'm not giving you a political answer. I'm just very reluctant to highlight celebrities who I don't know. I don't know who they are behind the scenes. I don't know how they treat their children, their partners. I don't know how they treat the person who can't do anything for them. I'm very big on noticing that there are good and decent humans in our communities who probably don't drive fancy cars, who don't get a lot of accolades, who are serving, who are contributing, who are showing the very best of humanity. And I think we owe it to our families, to our communities, to emphasize that, to celebrate that. Again, I want to encourage healthy masculinity and to get boys thinking about when they show up as a young man, are they putting other people at ease? What was so beautiful today is when we unpacked with your boys on a board back there about what is it to be a good man, they talked about making other people feel safe and respected. And I want to continue to drum that up in them, to make that something that we should all desire, that when you as a man walk in the room, other people are at ease because it's like, wow, here's a decent man, here's a kind man, here's a respectful man. Not to give people the ick, but to put them at ease. I think we have to engage their hearts by starting with this empathy piece, recognizing that they themselves are struggling. I take boys on a bit of a journey, and I'm not saying I do this right. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to reflect on how do I engage their hearts and minds. And I guess starting with the fact that I recognize there are things in their world and in their lives that make it tough for them, and using that as a catalyst that we can extend care for one another. We started our final session today with the boys and girls by asking the girls to talk to the whole crowd and the boys about why it's tough to be a young man, that they would empathize with them as boys. And I asked the boys the exact same question in reverse. Boys, tell me, why is it tough to be a young woman in this culture? And this mutual reciprocal empathy, and their answers are beautiful. They get it. 95% of those challenges that they're all facing, they're all in it together. So rather than being hostile and adversaries, I want them to recognize that they play a role in hopefully making life and the world a better place for one another. But I feel like we have to take them on the journey to see, I get it. You have challenges. You have struggles. You are human too. Engage their minds. Boys love the idea of being rebellious, so I love the idea of engaging the idea that, do you know that these companies prey on you? Why? What are they trying to get from you? What are they trying to sell you? Why are they doing that? I love hearing them critically think through why these companies talk to them in the way that they do. What are they trying to get from them? I encourage them this no-free dopamine lifestyle. Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm a little Italian boy deep down inside, so I get lots of dopamine from eating lots of wog food and cheeseburgers and all these things. But as much as possible, I want to encourage young boys and all young people to get as much healthy hits of dopamine as possible, to get offline, to log off, to go and find things that make them come alive. We get dopamine hits through new stimulation and through accomplishing things. And young boys and all young people can be engaged to actually find a deep sense of their own identity, their sense of self by doing things offline, taking on new challenges and mastering them. Not being good at something and then finding yourself improving is such a great sense of reward. And that's for me like the grounded in confidence. I want to help them challenge culture, help them to be an upstander, for them to actually be secure and grounded in themselves. And one of the things I said to your young men today is like, I wish I could bottle the feeling of what it's like, and I'm sure we've all potentially tasted this, is like when you stand up and do the right thing even when it's hard, even if you're getting a backlash, whether you know that could cost you a promotion, cost you a friendship, cost you something, but it's like you're happy to do what's right even in the face of adversity. And I say to your young boys, because I want to drum up in them a desire that like that feeling, there's not too many better feelings in life than when you actually stick by your convictions and do the right thing. I'd love this. Some of the schools ask me if you could do anything in the world, Dan, with unlimited resources. That doesn't exist, but they'll ask me, and I say to them, I love the idea of can we somehow find a way to package soft skills and EQ for boys in a way that they recognize that is not only so important, but it's essential if they want to succeed in life in any industry. Certainly if they want to have healthy relationships, but there's more and more research coming out that soft skills are so essential for entrepreneurship, for being a good coach, for being a good teammate. Like, it's so obvious, but finding a way to encourage that rather than this Sigma mindset. And my final point, and I'll move on from here, and this is the toughest one, but every summer I keep coming back to this when I reflect on, like, I love what I get to do, but what else? And I think as much as possible, and schools are trying this, but as a society, and especially in the Western world, we've just lost sight of the notion of a rite of passage, where boys are initiated into manhood by other men. Because the worry is, and this is what we see with schoolies, with drinking, with doing risky, stupid things, is like if that doesn't happen in a healthy way for boys, they're going to want to prove that they're a real man to other uninitiated boys. And that's my worry. And friends, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to speak about that, but I say that because genuinely, I'm not saying I have the answers or you guys need to have the answers for that right now, but I just know the more that I engage with this work, that is ultimately the biggest missing piece that we as a society have to drum up an appetite to do something about if we want to see healthier young men becoming good adult men who can lead, love, and live faithfully with themselves and with others. And so I want to thank you all for this absolute privilege. As I say to all of my audiences, there's so much we can do, and I'll hand to Melinda at a moment who will continue to illuminate this, is like really simply, what will we champion and what will we challenge, Where to from here? What are the things we need to champion in our young people, and what are the things that we need to challenge? I want to thank you so much for the privilege.
Well, thank you so much. Can I just check who heard it? So things are different, as Daniel said. When I was young, if you got a pen like that, you just thought, you were so cool. You'd won the lottery, hadn't you? Filters back in the 80s. He texted his first word today. I thought that was funny. Is that not funny? I thought that was kind of funny. So yeah, it's a different time, isn't it? Now, why would I inflict this image on you? This image. Well. do much, they don't achieve much, they just exist to be gazed at and enjoyed for their bodies. I asked a group of boys in a different school, what does our little boy learn from this image? And one of them replied, hot cars attract hot chicks, which wasn't exactly where we were trying to land this message. Calvin Klein, I make money in my Calvin, says the male, and the woman says, I seduce in my Calvins. This is not even an old ad. So you see how our boys get unhealthy ideas about women, and as girls get unhealthy ideas about themselves and their own value and worth. These two billboards are for strip clubs in Brisbane. The photo of these billboards advertising the local strip clubs was taken by a teacher friend of ours. She's a teacher at Brisbane Boys Grammar. She stood in the playground, took that photo and sent it to me. Advertising strip clubs over boys' schools, and there's no rules, no regulation to stop that. Oh, gotcha. Oh, sorry, boarding families. All right, well, I've just shown a whole lot of bad stuff, and it's all terrible. But sorry about that. Yes. So, as I said, billboards advertising strip clubs over boys' schools. Now, the same boys might have been sitting in the respect and consent education classes that day. They walk outside to kick the footy around, and they're being advertised naked women. City beach T-shirts for men and boys. The only advantage of these girls tell me that they're like a red flag on two legs walking towards you. You know, don't make eye contact, cross the road, don't get into the lift. Lingerie Football League came to Australia. If men want to play gridiron, they wear the clothes in the bottom there, and if women want to play, they're expected to sign up for the Lingerie Football League and sign contracts agreeing to accidental nudity, which of course is the whole idea. This is not legitimate women's sport. Here's a little boy at his first match on the Gold Coast learning early about women as entertainment. Honey Birdette sex store, Playboy-owned sex store in our family shopping malls all around the country, floor to ceiling, pornified portrayals of women. Now, education doesn't just happen in the classroom, does it? Education happens everywhere in the broader culture. And so all this education is undermining our attempts to teach respect and consent. During Christmas, they showed Santa in sexually suggestive poses in the shop windows just metres from where little kids were lining up to get their photos taken with Santa. See what our boys learn, see what our girls learn as well. This is a remote control for boys to buy. They sit in the consent classes and then they can go and buy this remote control that says, give me beer, sex, food, TV, clean, say yes, say no, premenstrual syndrome alert, no nagging, and a mute button at the top left. And it's hard to believe, isn't it? There's no laws, no restrictions on any of these products. Fashion Novas, Fashion Range, the Slut and Whore range, like there's nothing else that's valuable for our girls. This is their only value. All right, we're going to play a bit of an exercise now. If you haven't heard me speak before, you can play. I've had some cheaters in my audience lately and they've got the answer straight away. And I'm like, how did you know that? We heard you speak before. Why don't you just shut up? So, parents, what do you think is the product on sale here? What are we selling? Call it out for me nice and loud. Lingerie, no. Perfume, no. Couch, no. Shoes, no. Hair products, no. Ring, no. Tanning, no. I'm going to give you a clue. It's in the face area. Mascara is the closest so far. Eyelashes. Who said eyelashes? Hands up. You are the winner there. Let's give her a clap, the lady in the denim jacket. Now, do you have children at this school? How many? One. He's just got a free scholarship. You're good with that, Glenn? Free scholarship for the rest of his schooling life. Excellent. Such a generous offer. Thank you. So you get the idea, right? Women are posed and styled to sell anything like this. Now, my favourite answers were one teenage boy who said cat food, another said conjunctivitis cream for itchy eyes, a dad said chiropractor. I did not want to know where he went to get his back fixed, and a mum said hemorrhoid cream. So we do get some pretty special responses to that one. GQ magazine, see how the men are dressed compared to the women. Let's have a bit of a laugh. What might we see were we to pose and style men in the same way that we pose and style women? Now, I'm not saying we should do this. I don't believe in equal opportunity objectification, but you get the idea, don't you? So we say we're against violence against women, but these are all mainstream ads. You know, some of these images are distressing. I apologise, but I've taken them all from mainstream advertising. This is a giant sticker men can use to decorate their cars with in this country. Found that one on the Sunshine Coast. This is a shop that sells belts, bags and accessories. All mainstream. It's not rape, it's a snuggle with a struggle. T-shirts, hoodies. Eat, sleep, rate, repeat. No means no except if I'm drunk. IF on the first date. Now this is a company called T-Public that we at Collective Shout are going after big time. Thousands and thousands of pornified images on babies' clothes. Thousands of incest-themed images, child sexual abuse images. And this is a major company. It's owned by a Melbourne-registered company called Articore. We have forced them to remove thousands of products, but there's still many, many more. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Violent video games, you know, the research says that we're knocking the empathy out of our kids, teaching them to be callous. We're teaching them that violent solutions offer the way to be powerful and are an effective and appropriate way to settle conflict. And we're emotionally desensitizing our kids towards violence in real life. And this would be one of our biggest fears, is the loss of empathy. Daniel and I talk about empathy a lot. And what teachers are telling me is that the students are more cruel, more verbally abusive, more physically abusive. If you notice, there's a trend on TikTok, it's fight videos, so students bashing each other up. And there's a newer one which is girls beating each other up. And what you notice is all the young people stand around live streaming it for their friends. No one intervenes, no one tries to help. What does this say about us? Where are we heading as a civilization if they don't even intervene, if they can't enter into the suffering of another person? And violent video games, the deluge of violence they see on social media is contributing to this desensitization and of course declining rates of mental health, anxiety on the rise, suicidal behaviour, a risk for 14 to 15-year-old girls. Body image is now linked to social media, so there's global data now on the links between decreased body image and social media. It's quite spectacular research actually, and it shows that only 10 to 15 minutes of exposure to idealised Instagram imagery results in increased body dissatisfaction. 10 to 15 minutes is all it takes for the mood to go down. And I explained to your girls today why that is. The Instagram influencers make money by selling stuff. If the girls feel good about themselves, they don't buy all the crap that the influencers tell them they need to have to feel better. So it's by design that their moods will go down. This is a new book by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. He says that introducing smartphones to young people constitutes the largest uncontrolled experiment humanity has ever performed on its own children. The smartphone is the modern-day hypodermic needle, delivering digital dopamine 24/7 for a wired generation. It's resulted in an increase in suicide, self-injury, self-harm, anxiety, depression, and rates of hospitalisation for mental health showed sharp increases for boys and for girls. This graph looks at hospital admissions for non-fatal self-harm, so girls cutting themselves. And it found a 189% increase in the 10 to 14-year age group, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. 189% increase since 2009, and we all know what was introduced to our girls then. 1 in 4 wants to have plastic surgery. Hundreds of plastic surgery games marketed to primary school girls. I've gone to primary schools where girls know this game, they're playing it. And so already we're teaching them, you're not good enough, you're not hot enough, you need to be altered, you need to be changed. I don't know if you've noticed this trend, hashtag Sephora Kids on TikTok. It is insane. Thousands of little girls, 8, 9, 10, showing their makeup videos, their beauty tips, their beauty tutorials. They're going into Mecca here in Australia, and they are spending hundreds of dollars. We have to ask where they're getting that money from. Parties now for little girls, they have to give big bags of Mecca face products, cosmetics. And they're videoing themselves during doing their beauty tutorials. And it's a trend. It's a trend on TikTok. And what dermatologists are saying is they're seeing skin injuries in children never seen before, where little girls are coming in and their skin's peeling off their faces because they're using acid treatments, they're using retinol, these products designed for mature skin. They're buying them up and using them on their own skin. Cosmetic doctors are saying they're seeing something called cosmetic acne in children, in little girls, because of all these products that they are using. Like, don't we want our girls to be doing something better than this? Yeah, but this is what we've taught them is important. I wanted to get famous on TikTok. I learned if you post stuff showing your body, people will start liking it. Yes, they will, and they'll be the kind of people, aka men, that we really don't want hanging around the pages of young girls. But that's where we've taught them their compliments, their accolades come from. Girl posts a picture of her artwork, she'd be lucky to get a handful of likes. Post a sexy selfie and you'll get hundreds. I showed this image to your girls today. You know, I want the girl on the right to be more recognisable than the woman on the left. So we have Kendall Jenner and her contribution to humanity, and then we have Alyssa Carson, a 19-year-old astronaut. And, you know, sadly, we don't really know Alyssa Carson, do we? Certainly none of the girls at St Monica's knew who she was, but I wish they did. Wouldn't you like girls to recognise her as much as, or preferably more than, Kendall Jenner? I'm just going to race through this now because Daniel has done this. So we are creating a never-before-seen experiment on the healthy sexual development of our young people, and I don't know what hope there is for them to form healthy, intimate relationships when porn is their biggest sex educator. Porn is the biggest department of education in the world. Now, a lot of parents say my kid wouldn't go looking for porn. Well, they don't have to go looking. The porn will find your child. It doesn't matter how amazing your kid is. The porn industry needs to groom the next generation of consumers and will deliberately drop porn into your child's feed. Your child could be searching for their favourite cartoon character and come across XXX porn, because the porn industry has named entire XXX porn websites after children's favourite cartoon characters. Dorothy the Dinosaur, My Little Pony, The Simpsons, Disney characters have porn sites named after them. So we have to understand how predatory this industry is if we are going to protect our children. I've got so many stories from parents, I'll just read you a handful. My children were exposed to porn on the school bus by children accessing it regularly. My youngest was in prep at the time. My 9-year-old daughter was groomed in the chat room on her favourite computer game. I called the police and asked them if they publish on their webpage a list of games that predators were known to frequent. They responded with, no, predators are on all the games. My daughter was sent dick pics. She's in primary school. My 11-year-old daughter was contacted by a man through Instagram threatening to hurt her and her family if she didn't send nude pictures. Now think about this, parents. A porn magazine contains maybe 40 photos. A smartphone has access to millions. We wouldn't let our children behind a closed door with a stack of porn magazines. Why don't we think of the phone the same way? It is full of porn and predators. What do you think is going to happen? Our Watch wrote this report and said that porn was creating uncertainty and demands around sexual relationships from male peers and partners. I'm worried about the effect porn has on boys my age, the expectations they will place on me and other women as a result of viewing porn. The Australian Secondary Students and Sexual Health Survey found the average age at which young people first experience unwanted sex is 14.9 years. That's not even the first age, it is just the average. 61% of survivors of sexual violence are now under the age of 18. And this is probably the most shocking thing I could tell you today. Not only are adolescent boys now in the top cohort of sex offenders generally, they are also now the most common perpetrator of abuse of children. That's a sobering stat. Now, they certainly weren't born like that, were they? They weren't born like that. We have socialised them. We have created them that way. And something has just gone so terribly wrong, and we certainly need to sort that out. I'm just going to race through these. As I said, we're seeing it play out in our schools. So we have a rise of child-on-child sexual violence at rates never before seen. Primary school children acting out sexually on other children. It's not their fault. Again, they're acting out what they've been taught, what they've learned. What do young people tell us? Well, Daniel's mentioned some of this already. Sextortion is huge. 1,000 reports of sextortion to e-safety in 2023 alone, all involving boys. They're being preyed on by bots, by predators. They think they're talking to some, hot girl. They're actually talking to someone in a criminal gang. So There's entire criminal networks, some of them operating out of Nigerian slums, and they have thousands and thousands of social media accounts that look like legitimate women, and they're not, right? They're all gangsters in this criminal gang, and they're preying on our boys. That's 1,000 reports just in 2023. Imagine how many more incidents there would be that haven't been reported. And just late last year, an Australian boy in New South Wales took his life within hours of realising he'd been tricked. So he exchanged photos with this woman, this girl, discovered it was a man. The man was blackmailing him, trying to get him to pay money, and he went and killed himself only hours later. So that's why we've got to have these conversations openly so that our boys understand the risks. What do girls tell me? Well, they say they're ranked at school on their bodies compared to the bodies of porn stars. They're touched, they're groped, they're told their mothers are MILFs. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to tell you. They're threatened with rape if they don't send nude pictures. Sometimes their mothers or sisters get threatened. They tell me that they are subjected to groaning and moaning noises every day, mostly in the co-ed setting, where they're groaned at, grunted at, moaned at. Even the younger ones, sometimes the older boys teach the little boys how to do this, and the girls are subjected to it. And they're very distressed about it, obviously. So, you know, I've got to give you some good news, because you've all turned blue and stopped breathing, and you're hoping that Glenn will get some nice speakers in next time. But this is actually good news, because we do hear from young people who have been empowered, who learn this. We have a right to say no and not feel bad about it. And that was one of the key learnings today with the girls at St Monica's. I said, what did you learn today? We're allowed to say no. We're allowed to stand up for ourselves. We're allowed to clarify our values. We're allowed to act according to our boundaries. So that's very rewarding. And I know Daniel finds it rewarding too when the boys respond like this. So what can you do, parents? How can you act personally, and how can you act collectively to change this? What can we do at home? We need to teach basic body safety. Your body parts are private. No one else can touch you. We call our body parts by their correct names. You have a safety circle of adults, 5 people that you could trust to tell if something has happened. And research out of Australian Catholic University shows that the majority of kids want to tell mum or dad before anyone, so be that parent. Have rules around computers, devices, screen time, violent games, music. Be careful what you share online. French research shows 50% of the photos exchanged on child sexual exploitation forums were initially posted by parents on social media. 50%. So your innocent photo of your child should be an innocent photo of your child, but sadly, that's not how these predators see them, and they share them in global online galleries. We need to really understand how predators behave and how much our children are at risk. Amongst kids who have shared their own nudes, 43% admitted they had shared them with someone they did not know in real life. 43%. The AFP says children as young as 5 are filming themselves naked and posting it online. The We Protect Global Alliance found a 360% increase in self-generated sexual imagery of 7 to 10-year-olds during COVID lockdowns. 360% increase, 7 to 10-year-olds sending sexual pictures of themselves to strangers. It only takes 19 seconds for the grooming conversation to be initiated, and it takes just an average of 45 minutes for it to be completed. So within 19 seconds, the predator will initiate high-risk grooming conversations with your child. What are the red flag messages? What do you need to convey to your child that if they get messages like this on social media, they need to tell you straight away? Feel free to take a screen capture of that. I'll never share anything you send me. Your parents don't understand you the way I do. Can you delete your chats? Can you keep this just between us? Let's switch to another app so we can talk privately. I can help you make some money. All red flags of predators' behaviour. If your child is online, they will be approached by predators, okay? It's tragically as simple as that. Risks of social media platforms. What are the 5 most dangerous apps? You can read about this in more detail on the BARK website, B-A-R-K, but Snapchat, number 1. Instagram number 2, TikTok number 3, well, number 5. Roblox as well, Roblox gaming. This is the story I mentioned about the boy taking his life after being scammed and threatened to distribute nude photos in attempted sextortion. Teenager from New South Wales. So what can you tell your young person? Stop the chat, take screenshots of the text and profile, block the account and report it to the platform, report it to the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation. Don't send more images, don't pay, don't respond to demands, don't enter into further communication, and don't think you are alone. This is a new interactive film that you can watch with your young person. You can find it online. It's called No Escape Room, and it will teach your child the risks of sextortion. It follows the story of a 15-year-old boy's exploitation online, and I do think every parent and every boy especially needs to view this. Well, it's about a 15-year-old, but you know, sextortion is happening. What do you think, Daniel? They should watch this, maybe 12, 11? Yes. It's hard to know how to have these conversations with our kids. We wish we didn't have to. You can say there are certain things online that aren't made for kids, things that you can't unsee. You might see pictures of people without clothes on, pictures that show private parts. These images can make you feel confused, upset, sick or worried. If you see something like this, you need to click off straight away and come and tell me. You won't get into trouble and I won't get cross. Now, you've got to try to see it like this. If your child tells you they've seen porn, try to take it as a compliment. Try to get your head around this. It's the kids who don't tell their parents that I worry about more. If they tell you, it shows they trust you, they see you as the safe parent to tell. Take it as a compliment. Try not to collapse, scream, reach for the smelling salts, contact your partner at work and say it's the end of the world, it's over. Take a breath, tell them this is common, it happens to children a lot. Praise them for telling you. Keep the channels of communication open. Check security on devices. Install filtering software if you haven't already done so. If exposure was at school, raise the issue with school authorities. It is highly likely that other children will have been exposed as well. It won't just have been your child. Find engaging activities to help your child find value and enjoyment and grow resilience, develop good habits and check in on them to see how they are going afterwards. What can we do at home? Lead by example, bringing children up in a family where respect and empathy is modelled, not tolerating disrespectful behaviour, helping boys, as Daniel said, to be upstanders and not bystanders. They'll watch how we behave. They'll watch what we put up with or don't put up with, how we treat each other. I want to ask a broader philosophical question now, and that is this what life is meant to be like? Now, I didn't check if this was hooked up to sound before, so we'll see. No, it's not. It's not playing. Let me see. Daniel, could you, send this is your computer, can you just try and help me play this video? Yeah, I did. Here we go. So you're not getting the sound, but imagine eerie, creepy music. Them scrolling in their sleep. Yeah, I was chilled the first time I saw that, the children scrolling in their sleep. So this is really a broader conversation about what we're tolerating. I find myself worrying that when we hand our children phones, we steal their boredom from them. We are raising a generation of writers who will never start writing, artists who will never start doodling, chefs who will never make a mess of their kitchen, athletes who will never kick a ball against a wall, musicians who will never pick up their aunt's guitar and start strumming. What are we losing from the sum of humanity because of this default option of the phone? Yeah, what might they never discover? What might they have discovered? Cures for cancer, ends to war, who knows? Are you worried about your teenager being uncontactable for half an hour between school and home? You should provide them with a smartphone capable of streaming hardcore porn directly into their developing brains every minute they get left alone for the entire duration of their most formative years. It's a satirical publication, but it makes a pretty good point, I think. And what are we modelling again at home? You know, they're watching us all the time, aren't they? And we're all junkies for this thing. Can I call you back? I'm watching a live stream. I like that. Thank you. I'm glad you like that, lady up the back. Thank you very much. This young koala has a mental health problem. We're diagnosing all these kids with mental health problems, and we've cut down the healthy environment, haven't we, that would support our kids. We can get involved collectively. I founded with some friends this movement 15 years ago, Collective Shout, for a world free of sexploitation. And I have these cards up on the table up there with QR codes on them that will take you to our website and our social media pages. And I've got sign-up sheets there as well if you'd like to be on my mailing list. Have you contacted your MP about this? You know, you vote for them, you pay them, your taxes dollars pays their salaries. Ask them what they're doing about this. We've had so many wins, I don't have time to share them all with you. Hundreds of victories, you can read about them on our website, targeting the companies that exploit women and girls, that feed porn to kids, the big tech industries that are harming our children, the corporations, advertisers and marketers. We got rid of 3 porn magazines in Australia, People, Picture and Zoo. Now, Picture and People were in Australia for 80 years. You would have seen them next to the lollies beside the counter, corner stores, 7-Elevens, petrol stations. 80 years, we got rid of them in 7 weeks by putting the faces of the Bauer Media Group executives beside images from these magazines on social media, and that's all it took. The CEO called me into his office and said, we're not going to publish it anymore. I wasn't expecting that, I must say. You can see he was delighted to have a selfie taken with me to share with my supporters. This was a great win. The Norwegian beach handball team decided they didn't want to play beach handball in minuscule bikinis anymore. They said they weren't comfortable, they saw inappropriate images of themselves online, they couldn't play to the peak of their ability. So at the Euro competition in Spain, they swapped the bikinis for bike shorts and they were fined for inappropriate clothing. It's comedy gold, you just cannot make this up. And so we ran the Let Them Wear Shorts campaign and we were successful. The International Handball Federation changed its rules. We got rid of this recently, can you believe it? Baby fishnet stockings on the Shein kids shopping platform. And we've got some of these removed, not all of them. IF on the first date that I mentioned earlier. There's thousands of products like this. They're slowly getting rid of them. Resources to protect your child. How to talk to your kids about porn. This is the simplest, easiest, most accessible book I found on having these conversations we wish we didn't have to have. I got this from the US and got the licensing rights to make it available here in Australia. Raising Resilient Kids, got a few of these left. Experts in raising resilient children, including Michael Carr-Gregg, Susan McLean, Michael Gross and others. There's just a few of those left now up on the table. And I've got Raising Tech Healthy Humans. What I love about this book, it's about online safety, but it's about parenting in a big tech world. Steve Biddulph has endorsed this, I've endorsed this. These two are on a special deal tonight. I've got Susan McLean's book, Sex, Text and Selfies. The cyber cop, Susan McLean, classic text on online safety. Girlwise series, I've got a couple of those left, and they're for girls 7 to 12. My book, Getting Real, Challenging the Sexualisation of Girls, Big Porn Inc., and Prostitution Narratives, Stories of Survival in the Sex Trade. You know, this trade is preying on our girls. So many girls think, I don't need to finish school, I don't need to get a job, I'll just sell myself on OnlyFans, because they've been lied to about that platform. And my newer title is He Chose Porn Over Me, Women Harmed by Men Who Use Porn, first-person accounts, 25 women harmed by compulsive porn-using men. Free resources through the E-Safety Commission. This one shows you where we are up to. Free e-book about online safety for under 5s. The fact that we even need to create an e-book for online safety for under 5s shows where we are up to, doesn't it? Fight the New Drug, a great website for our young people who are resisting porn, can find support there. If you want to understand this phenomenon that Daniel's been talking about today, BBC Three documentary, you can find that online. Understand the cult-like pull of men like this. If you want to share a story or read the stories of other parents, Kids Exposed on our Collective Shout website. Porn kills love, but real love wins, and we have to believe this, or we couldn't keep doing this work. It is just too hard. We want our kids to know the real thing, to know there's something wonderful and beautiful and intimate and caring and devoted. And the world isn't offering them that, is it? And love very rarely comes up in conversations in schools with young people. So we want to get that word sort of back on the table and back into conversation. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I know it's a lot. It is a lot. Any comments or questions? Normally I would move over closer to you, but I have to stay here for the filming. So comments, questions, trauma counselling, pastoral care, principal's phone number. Happy to talk one-on-one as well if you'd prefer that. Yeah, we can talk one-on-one if you'd rather have a personal conversation.
Hi, I'm Nadine. I just had a question in relation to, you've obviously spoken to the Year 9s.
Yes.
Your statistics are showing younger. At
Yes.
what point, having those confronting, challenging conversations, should you start?
Well, we've been asked to speak to grades 4, 5 and 6, and we would rather not. And I remember resisting it for a very long time until I finally conceded and addressed a group of grade 5s, and I got questions like, what do we do about the boys touching us in the wrong place at school? Or what do we do? I went to the park to meet this boy and it was an old man. You know, questions like this, and I thought, wow, you know. So we'd have to talk the body safety conversation very early, 5, 6 years old, understanding that their body's their own, no one else, you know, can touch them. Tell mum and dad if you feel worried, sick, anxious. Earlier, if you're talking porn specifically, unfortunately earlier than we would like. So, yeah, 9, 10. Yeah. Yes, of course. Just do it, yeah.
I just wanted to add something to that last question because, yeah, obviously when I speak to Year 5s and 6s, I want to be very, very delicate. So I'm sure, like you all, I'm trying to get a sense of what they know. So before I offer any information, I ask them so many questions up front. So I'll ask them something like, how many of you have a smartphone? And most of them put their hands up. And do you know if your mum or dad or trusted caregiver has put any safety mechanisms on your phone? And they'll put their hands up, and then I'll say, and do you know why that is? Because again, I want to hear it in their language. And they'll talk about scammers and they'll talk about predators, but you know, and then I won't necessarily use the word pornography, but maybe private pictures, private videos, which is, I know, something like police inspectors or detectives will talk about for younger audiences. And so I'll ask them about that. And that's when, like I said, the Year 5s and 6s will put their hands up and tell me about the sex bots and the predators. If you want to hear an exchange between myself and an 11-year-old boy, it's on my Instagram page about this. It's anonymous, like he's de-identified, and he tells you what's exactly going on in the worlds of his classmates. And this was a conservative Christian school out in Western Sydney that was very culturally diverse. And so, yeah, I just ask questions just to get a sense of where they're at before supplementing it with more information. Yeah.
Thank you. I just have a question about, I really appreciate your presentation this evening, and I'm sure the kids have appreciated it as well. My daughter's at St Monica's, and I'd like to thank the organisers. How do we keep these issues current? What are your recommendations? Like, where to from here? I know that the kids have been here today. And how do you see the schools, colleges, just some feedback as parents, how do we keep this current and alive in our children? Because I know, their busy life tomorrow will be an assignment or something different. And just some thoughts on that.
Well, the fact that the schools have had us now 2 years in a row, I think the school leaders have shown they want to keep these conversations going. The school leadership here and at St Monica's understands this isn't a one-off. You can't just have a one-off tick-a-box thing, yeah, we've done the consent thing. It has to, even the girls said today, can you come back every year? They saw the benefit of that. I can provide you with follow-up resources to use in the classroom, recommended websites, recommended sources of advice, material that you can use in the classroom, recommended help for parents as well. So we provide that as a matter of course after a visit to a school. And I think, the fact that you've done students, staff, parents today is great, because you've got the whole community involved there. That will help a lot. I think support each other, talk to each other, what's worked for you, what's worked in your families. We don't have all the answers. Gosh, this stuff's evolving every day. So you can share tips with each other, back each other up too. Sometimes parents that have a kind of stricter rules can be made to feel pariahs in some communities, and they feel like they're on the outer a bit. And but I think that is, a strong approach is actually going to be best. Yes.
That sort of leads into my question, which is, what do you advise for parents who have said no to a smartphone, and you're noticing that your son is in the minority, and he's coming home talking about what other kids are talking about, and he doesn't know. Even in my carpool group, I'm hearing the other kids in the car in the morning, this is year 7, talking about Sigma and practicing the jaw poses.
Yes.
And they're looking it up on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat, and my son doesn't have an entry into that, and I don't want him to.
That's very hard.
What do I do? He's 12 years old.
Well, every year of delay is beneficial. So the basic advice is delay, delay, delay. Every year of delay gives them a better chance of being more cognitively developed, understanding the risks, being able to make better decisions and better choices. Some parents get a dumb phone, and that's probably not going to be cool enough for the boys, but you don't need an internet-enabled device to communicate. Some parents tell me they use Skype. Their kids can chat to each other on Skype. Less risks. So I know it is hard. It is hard.
So keep saying no, we're waiting. You're not getting a smartphone until you're 16.
Just hold out as long as you possibly can. There would be benefits to that. Do you want to add to that at all with the boys, especially about boys?
Yeah, I think the research is pretty clear on the benefits of delay. The reality is at some point they will access a phone, they will utilise it. I think the biggest thing is just encouraging that this is a privilege, and whether they buy the phone themselves, whether you buy the phone, that there are certain boundaries and rules that go around it, because once the cat's out of the bag, it's hard to get it back. So I think the biggest thing is to make sure that there's clear understandings. I know that some people write up contracts that both, child and parent go through together and just say this is our agreement on what we do with this. And it's not just a purely legal and punitive thing, but it's actually this is a great privilege. This is an opportunity for learning, and that, with this privilege, there are duties and responsibilities. And I think just, going on that journey with them, perhaps even allowing them to kind of teach you what's going on in their online spaces. Rather than being that's too scary, that's too weird, leave it over there, actually inviting them to be if they, for example, get a phone in a year or 2 years, what apps are in and out, and if they're going to be on it, it's better that they show you and take you on that journey than that do that isolated with you oblivious to it. That's my thinking on that.
If you're interested in contracts, Susan McLean's book has draft contracts in there that you can use with your child.
I'd also probably just like to ask the group, are any other parents as terrified as I am when you pull up at Stop, Drop and Go in the afternoon and you see the second they're out the school gate, the number of boys, instead of talking to each other, and this is not just this school, it's at our other school as well, heads down, bent, slumped over, straight onto their phone the second they're out the school gates. And I'm glad that the school has the no phones rule in school, but then the second they're out, that's obviously what they're all doing. It's very heartbreaking.
Yes, it is heartbreaking. Well done on the school for having a no phones policy during the day. That's a big step. That's a great start. We had one principal tell us that for the first time in years they were hearing noise from the playground once they banned the phones in schools. Yeah.
McLean's seminar, and
Yep.
she's a phenomenal speaker.
Yeah.
And she told us about apps that predators are using AI to
Yes.
get images of children, like it's just a
That's right.
profile picture of a child on their sports registration or something like that,
Yes.
and using those images and creating, using AI to create a pornographic image.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask how, and since then the question is, how do we report these? Like Google Play Store, how do we report these, or who do we go to?
E-Safety Commission, you report them to the E-Safety Commission, and we at Collective Shout have been doing that. We've found entire Instagram accounts featuring little boys with thousands and thousands of predators following them and commenting on them. They're all AI created, but what people need to realise is that artificial intelligence, unfortunately, makes it sound like it's a complete construct. But many of the images that we found are actually based on real children. They actually started with a real child's image. So any parent's child, any of your children can end up on these whole forums and sites for pedophiles and predatory men. Like, this needs to be shut down on a global scale. Like, this is beyond us as parents. We actually can't manage that risk to our children. So that's why we're part of a global coalition calling on the big tech companies not to stop this. But you can report to E-Safety in the first instance, E-Safety Commission. Yep. Those tools are all on their website. You know, police are now saying that they're going to be completely overrun with reports because the AI-generated images are so real and so lifelike that police globally are saying their whole reporting system is going to be overrun because they won't know what's a real child that they need to go and try and find, or what's, you know, a completely constructed image. They won't be able to tell the difference. So it's, you know, it's going to completely overwhelm an already overwhelmed system. Yeah, it's diabolical. We should end on a happy note. Anyone got a good story? Well, it's good that you've got us in, that you've had us in here, and that you're doing what you can to protect your kids, you know, from the school leadership to you as parents. So we've had a great time with your young people today.
Yeah, it's very confronting, isn't it? I've got 3 daughters, as some of you know, and I see them on the phones all the time. And actually the question about walking out the school gates and the boys being on their phones, we as teachers comment on that all the time. We walk up and down the front there and try and talk to them, and they're just ready for that dopamine hit, and they are straight on their phones, and that's when they're the hardest to talk to. When they're off their phones in the schoolyard, they're easy to talk to. They'll walk past, I'll say good day, they'll have a chat, but it's very addictive. So my biggest suggestion is put them in boarding, because we have a no phone policy for, we take it off them at night, isn't that right, Desiree? Yes. So, but we do have those rules in our boarding school too. In boarding, just scrape through. Yep. Look, I really want to thank Melinda and Dan. They've been great today. They've had a huge day. They've spoken to our kids for 6 hours. They had a staff meeting with our staff and went through the information that you've just been given, and then they're here late tonight too. So not just thank them for what they've done here, but I know Melinda and Dan have been championing this for many years. 19 years ago I saw Melinda doing it. So the fact that they have been on this bandwagon for 20 years, drumming up support, raising our awareness, it's fantastic, I think. So on behalf of St Augustine's and St Monica's, and Alison's got some gifts for you and I do too, if we can just show our appreciation to Melinda and Dan, please.
Just a couple of small gifts.